Good morning and welcome to this morning's service. I'm Junko Lo and I will be your chairperson today. We will begin this morning's service with reading of the three treasures on page 8 in your purple service book and also displayed on the screen. Hard is it to be born into human life. Now we are living it. Difficult is it to hear the teachings of the Blessed One. Now we hear it. If we do not realize the truth in this life, when will it be realized? Let us reverently take refuge in the three treasures of the truth. I take refuge in the Buddha. May we be absorbed ourselves in the principle of the way to enlightenment and awaken in ourselves the supreme will. I take refuge in the Dharma. May we be submerged in the depths of the doctrine and gain wisdom as deep as the ocean. May refuge in the Sangha. May we live in harmony in the great assembly as disciples of Buddha and be freed from the bondage, becoming units of true accord in the life of harmony, in a spirit of universal oneness, freed from the bondage of selfishness. Even through myriad ages of kalpas, hard is it to hear such an excellent, profound, and wonderful doctrine. Now we are able to hear and receive it. Let us thoroughly understand the true meaning of Tathagata's teaching. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. We will now have Sutra chanting Sanbutsuge on page 79 in your purple service book and displayed on your screen. We will now have our Dharma talk given by Reverend Henry Adams.
Namam Davuts, 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 Namam Davuts. Namam Davuts. Namam Davuts. Please join me in Gassho. Gassho onegaishimasu. The cloud of light is unhindered like open sky. There is nothing that impedes it. Every being is nurtured by this light. So take refuge in Amida, the one beyond conception. Koun muge nyokoku issai no uge ni sawari nashi. Kotaku kamuranu monozo naki. Nanjigi o kimyo seo. Namam Davuts, Namam Davuts, Namam Davuts, Namam Davuts. Good morning, everyone. Ohayou gozaimasu. Happy Father's Day to the fathers who are joining us here today. Thank you for taking time to be with us here today, both in person and for those who are joining us via Zoom. For this occasion, I find myself reflecting upon both my own father and my experience as a father myself. And I think back to these teachings of the Buddha and these words I shared at the beginning of my talk, which talks about, it says, the cloud of light is unhindered like open sky. And this light represents the Buddha's wisdom. And it says there's nothing that impedes it, and every being is nurtured by this light. And so take refuge in Amida, the one beyond conception. And so, I think oftentimes on this occasion, we think about our own fathers, but and we can also think about other family members, other friends, other people who have nurtured us with wisdom in our lives, and the great wisdom that we receive from the Buddha. I, again, reflect upon my own father, the ways in which he nurtured me, the ways in which I try to nurture my own children, and recognize the many ways in which I find myself coming up short. I remember an occasion when I was about the age of my own son, who just finished 5th grade and is going into, he'll be starting 6th grade in the fall. And when I was in 6th grade, around this age of 11 years old, my father and I took a trip. We went to visit Civil War battlefields on the East Coast of the United States. And I remember my dad, when he told me about this trip, he says, "Okay, Henry, we're gonna take a trip, just you and me, a dad and lad vacation." He was always talking about doing dad and lad activities. We're gonna take a dad and lad vacation. I was like, "Oh, where are we gonna go? Are we gonna go to Disney World? Are we gonna go? Or we're gonna go to Chicago?" He says, "We're gonna go to visit Civil War battlefields." And I thought, okay. My father was a passionate student of the history of the American Civil War, and I always wondered what was it that intrigued him about that so much. And so we went on this trip. We flew into Washington, D.C. We visited some of the Civil War memorials there around the nation's capital, and then we drove into the other areas in those border states, Pennsylvania and so forth, where many of the important battles of the Civil War had been fought. And my father, I think, in order to sort of instill in me fond memories of this trip, he let me pick almost every restaurant where we ate. So we ate at Pizza Hut, we ate at Arby's, we ate at McDonald's. It was like McDonald's for breakfast, Arby's for lunch, Pizza Hut for dinner. Lots of fast food. And he and I enjoy fast food, and so we had that bonding experience, but also going to visit these places. And these Civil War battlefields are they're like national museums and national parks, many of them. And you go in and you visit these battlefields, and they're beautiful. We went in the springtime. The springtime in that mid-Atlantic coast is just beautiful, beautiful, lush green. It was still brown at that time in Minnesota, I remember. And then because it doesn't start getting green until much later in the spring. But I remember just the lush greenness, the freshness of the air, and how peaceful the parks were, how peaceful they were. And then we would go into the museums, and we would see paintings and artifacts from that time. We would see paintings of battle scenes, smoke everywhere, people shooting each other with muskets and attacking one another with swords. We would see uniforms that the soldiers wore at the time, many of which bore the marks of battle. And there was this contrast between the peace that we were seeing there and the tremendous the violence of the war that had been fought. And I realized during that trip that this was something that my father wanted me to understand, that this nation that we live in, that this world that we live in, this peace that we enjoy, that behind that there has been conflict, and there continues to be conflict. My father, of course, grew up in the 1950s in Florida, and he said that he remembered as a child there would still be some very, very elderly Civil War veterans were still kind of around in his childhood, but he himself had no living memory of that time. But growing up in Florida in the 50s, it was very different than what I thought of as Florida. We took a family vacation to Florida once, and growing up in Minnesota, Florida is like a wintertime vacation destination. You go to Disney World, right? You go to Busch Gardens. You go to enjoy warm weather and fun activities. But he said, when I was growing up in Florida, it was Jim Crow South. It was segregation was severe, and my father was a poor white boy, and they lived adjacent to African American Black communities, but not in community with people, with the Black families who were their neighbors. And he would describe the tensions that were embedded in the society, the ways in which kids would get chased out of each other's neighborhoods if they ventured down the wrong street. And so he grew up with this real sense of the ongoing injustice, segregation, divisions in society. And in his heart, I believe he had awakened a wish for peace, a wish for reconciliation, for a world of harmony. And visiting those Civil War battlefields, there was a sense that wish had been held, and there were people who were willing to give their lives to undergo great and fearful battles in order to bring to light, to create a world of equality, a world of freedom for all, the ideals upon which this country were based, but also a deep understanding that we have yet to realize those ideals. And so as I, reflect upon this experience and this day today, June 19th, which is the Juneteenth holiday, the day in which we observe the formal end of slavery in the United States. June 19th, 1865 was the year in which General Gordon Granger of the Union Army, having entered into Texas, the most sort of remote state in the Confederacy at the end of the Civil War. So the Civil War ended in April 1865, and it took 2 months for the Union Army to then progress into all areas of the Confederacy, and until the Union Army arrived, slavery continued. And so it was only with the arrival of General Granger, and he issued a proclamation and said, all of the enslaved people in this state of Texas are free. The Union Army has now taken control of Texas, and so these people are free. Now, they were part of the United States, and when Abraham Lincoln had issued the Emancipation Proclamation long before, they were formally free, but the freedom was not realized until that June 19th. And so we cherish this day as a day in which that aspiration for freedom and equality is realized and affirmed. This aspiration for freedom and equality for all beings, this is at the heart of the Buddha's teachings. This is the Buddha's wish for all of us. He nurtures, we're told in these words of Shinran Chonin, that the light of the Buddha nurtures every being. So every person viewed in the light of the Buddha, in that light, equal, beautiful, precious, just as they are. And so as we reflect upon this world that we live in, we see that the world of the Buddha has not been realized in our world. And to me, it seems very difficult. Perhaps, hard to imagine that world of enlightenment can be realized when there are people like me who are filled with greed, anger, and delusion. I think not about others, but of how these things still dwell in myself. My father, he shared this insight with me. He shared how growing up, he was conditioned by his society to think that people were separate, that people were unequal. We call this a delusion. This is one of the three base passions. And from this then, greed, protect my neighborhood, protect my area. Anger, somebody comes in there, I get mad at them, I throw some rocks at them. And this is the world we live in, and sadly, this is not something that was in 1865 or 1958. This is something that happens today, happens continual, this aggression and violence in this world that we live in. And yet the Buddha says, do not despair of this world that we live in, but direct your mind to the world of awakening. Direct your mind to the world of peace and bliss. Have that as your clear destination. And then doing so, we're able to live with remarkable courage and clarity in the face of tremendous challenges. We live in this world with what we call the heart of the Bodhisattva, the heart which aspires not just to realize liberation for oneself, but liberation for all beings. And so we continue to live in this world of suffering with the understanding that we direct our lives to the world of awakening, to the ideals of a kind of wisdom that nurtures all beings. And we receive that wisdom in these words, Namo Amida Butsu. And we receive the equality and the freedom of the Dharma. The equality of the Dharma is the equality in which everyone, every living being, is precious and cherished, just as they are. The freedom of the Dharma is not just freedom to do what I want in the way that I want to do it. It's freedom from selfishness, freedom from attachments to me and mine. It's freedom to be able to do things that are difficult and challenging for the benefit of others, even when it would seem that one does not receive that benefit for themselves. But we do act wholly in this spirit of deep generosity. And it's not possible coming from that mind of greed, anger, and ignorance, but it is possible when we receive the Buddha mind in the Nembutsu, in these words, Namo Amida Butsu. So on this occasion of Father's Day and Juneteenth, for me, in my heart, there's a kind of connection with the experiences of my own family that have ultimately guided me here to the Dharma, in which I can appreciate the Buddha's wish for all beings to live with freedom, to enjoy equality in the true sense of being precious, just as we are, and cherished. And so I thank you very much for this opportunity to come together on this very special day and to take refuge in these words of wisdom from the Buddha. So we'll conclude once again with these words of Shinran Shonin. Please join me in Gassho. The cloud of light is unhindered like open sky. There is nothing that impedes it. Every being is nurtured by this light. So take refuge in Amida, the one beyond conception. Koun muge nyokoku, issai no uge ni sawari nashi, ko taku kamuranu monozonaki, nanjigi o kimyo seo. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namam Dabutsu. Namam Dabutsu. Namam Dabutsu. Namam Dabutsu. Namam Dabutsu.
Thank you, Reverend Adams. We enjoyed your reflections on your experiences and your father's experiences on this Father's Day, and your historical references to June 19th. Thank you. We will now have Dharma reflection by Chelsea Orita.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Father's Day and happy Juneteenth. Thank you, Reverend Henry Adams, for your Dharma talk. I always enjoy what he has to say. I also want to thank him for allowing me to give me a few minutes to speak. My name is Chelsea Orita, and I'm originally from Oahu, Hawaii, and I moved to San Francisco to attend the Academy of Art University, where I majored in graphic design. I've been attending BCSF for 6 years, where my Buddhist journey began. Being half Japanese and the other being Filipino, I did not grow up Buddhist. My mom was Catholic, like many Filipinos, and I did not grow up with my dad. I grew up in a very non-denominational household. I knew of BCSF because of the Bonodori and Bazaar in the years before I started attending in 2016. But I was much too timid to come to services on my own. I also started reading and learning about Buddhism online, which made me more curious. I remember looking at our website in the past, week by week, saying, okay, I'm going to go to service this week. I never did. Kevin introduced me to the temple in 2016. At the time, I had a terrible downstairs neighbor. I just wanted to get out of my apartment. But thanks to Elaine, we were able to evict him. I was mostly interested in mindful meditation on Wednesday nights because I was already meditating on my own, and I continued to do so. After meditating in the Hondo, we would sit in the social hall and talk about the Dharma, while eating snacks and drinking tea. At first I wasn't interested, But as time went on, I started paying attention to the messages and teachings such as the Four Noble Truths, attachment, and the three poisons. I started applying these teachings to my daily life. What I like most about the teachings is that they're practical. I started going to Sangha Services as well as Metta. I love Metta services because it was about loving kindness, which I was also practicing on my own. The one thing that always stood out to me was about Metta was when Elaine would say along the lines of, we can only give as much love to others as much as we love ourselves. It really struck a chord with me and has stuck with me throughout the years. Since 2016, I have come a very long way in loving myself as well as others. We always say in Wednesday night mindful meditation that we're brought here by causes and conditions. I joined the temple right as I was healing, gaining more confidence, and not seeking approval or validation from anyone. The Buddhist teachings have helped me on my own healing and made me more confident than I already was, and for that I am eternally grateful. Because of Buddhism, I am also more aware of not only myself, but as others as well. I've learned not to take things too personally, as people might react the way they did because of their own causes and conditions. It really put things into perspective. Because of this newfound knowledge, it made me realize the suffering of others where I was silently giving them compassion from afar. I'm incredibly grateful to have found Buddhism, aside from having fun dancing at Bonodori, eating the delectable snacks and foods from the bazaar. I've learned a lot, become grateful, more happier, and have become a better person overall. Thank you so much to Leo J for keeping mindful meditation going throughout the pandemic and giving us a safe space to share our feelings, our weekly thoughts, and by continuing to share the Dharma with us. Thank you to the rest of you for your friendships and allowing me to take refuge with you every week. After 6 weeks, I finally feel at home. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu.
Thank you, Chelsea, for your mindful reflection. We will now have Gatha, Hotoke no Kodomo. It will be found in the red binder, the second half of the red binder, where it says Statement for Shin Buddhist Service Book. So it will be on the second half of the red book.
And it's page 9 of the second half.
Page 9.
Of the second half. Did you find it? So skip the hands together in Gassho section, and you find supplement for Shin Buddhist Service Book, and in this section, page 9, you'll see Hotoke no Kodomo.
closing meditative reading will be given by Priscilla Kojimoto.
Since it's June 19th, I thought I'd do some short quotes from Dr. Martin Luther King and the Buddha. The first is from a famous letter, the letter from Birmingham jail. He wrote it after being arrested while participating in a peaceful demonstration, and he states, "We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality." And it sounds so much like our three treasures that we read today. And the last two are very simple, and it's on hate and love. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Martin Luther King. The Buddha says, "Hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal rule." From Buddha. Namo Buddha.
Thank you, Priscilla, for your closing meditative reading. I'd like to give appreciation for this morning's service to Reverend Elaine Donlan for ringing of the Kansho, to Reverend Adams for Sutra chanting and his Dharma talk, to Chelsea Arita for her Dharma reflection, to Yasko Wooster for playing our piano, and to Priscilla Kojimoto for the closing meditative reading. Are there any announcements? I have one before Kevin comes up. Next Sunday will be our annual LGBTQ service. Please join us in celebrating Pride Month.
Good morning. Happy Father's Day and happy Juneteenth. Quick reminder, today's the June Board of Directors meeting. It's at 1 o'clock. It'll be in person in the social hall or on Zoom. So if you're going to attend, maybe you could let one of us know so we know to expect you. Or if you'd like the Zoom link, you can ask one of us. And as always, everyone's welcome to attend and participate in the discussions. Thank you.
I'm sorry. I forgot I omitted Kevin Yoza as our Zoom engineer.
Great. I also wanted to share my appreciation to Chelsea for sharing a wonderful Dharma reflection, and just to invite other Sangha members as well. Our hope was that Chelsea would courageously kind of open the floodgates, and that others would be willing to share Dharma reflections like Chelsea's, journey about a story about her journey and how she's found meaning in her own life. So I share Chelsea's feeling that it's very meaningful to hear from all of our Sangha members what the Dharma means to you and how it's impacted your life. And so if others wish to share reflection or share some insights, feel free to reach out to me, and we can arrange for an occasion for you to do that as well. So thank you again, Chelsea, for getting us started with that.
Thank you, Reverend Evans. This concludes our morning service for today. Thank you for attending, and please stay safe and connected.